members of the committee, Representative Hull, Merrimack 23. Thank you for clarifying before that the bill is going to criminal justice afterward. Can I ask if the chair, if you're going to speak on the floor, make sure that that does in fact happen?
If it goes through the House in its first run, it will definitely go to criminal justice, according to the majority leader in a discussion about the bill.
Thank you. And then you noted earlier on the sponsor had the wrong initial. Is that going to be corrected in the Permanent Journal as well?
That should be, and I will follow it through.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of several people here. It was written by a former state rep, Representative Brandon Guida, who asked me to read this letter, which I will turn in at the end. JR, I am unable to be in Concord for the hearing tomorrow. If possible, please submit the following letter to the committee. Members of Congress and Consumer Affairs, I ask the committee to determine that this legislation is inexpedient to legislate for the following reasons. The legislation infringes on the rights of law-abiding citizens by inconveniencing them and restricting the rights to the normal commerce that has taken place in New Hampshire since its inception. Although legislation is normally proposed to fix a problem, in this instance, there is no problem to fix. I challenge the sponsors of this bill to point to a problem in New Hampshire, i.e. one firearm-related incident in New Hampshire that was caused by a private sale of a firearm. Further, this legislation would not fix the problems that the sponsors allege exist. The legislation only will inconvenience law-abiding New Hampshire citizens, as there is no question that a criminal that wants to buy a gun cannot simply comply with the law to obtain a gun. Among other things, criminals can buy a gun on the black market from another criminal in another state, and they can and will steal what they need. I challenge the sponsors of this bill to show that this bill will solve the purported problem and not just affect the law-abiding citizens. In summary, this legislation attempts to provide a solution for a problem that does not exist in New Hampshire. However, the proposed solution does not solve a non-existent problem, as only the law-abiding citizens will be affected. Respectfully, Brandon Guida.
You'll give us a copy of that letter?
Absolutely. Secondly, I would like to speak on behalf of New Hampshire Firearms Coalition. For the record, I am the board, secretary of the board. The New Hampshire Firearms Coalition is a membership organization representing manufacturers, dealers, and thousands of gun owners in the state of New Hampshire. As such, NHFC is strongly opposed to HB 1589, a bill that will put New Hampshire citizens in prison for up to 7 years for selling a gun to a friend or a neighbor. That is correct. Under the provisions of HB 1589, a law-abiding gun owner would not be allowed to dispose of his or her personal private property without going to and through a licensed firearm dealer. This bill will criminalize commonplace activities about which you may not even think about. For example, have you ever loaned your rifle to a friend on a hunting trip? Perhaps one of you thought to let a friend try one of your guns at the shooting range. HB 1589 passed, these two kinds of things could land an otherwise law-abiding citizen in jail. In fact, HB 1589 is so broad, any transfer that is not completed by a licensed firearm dealer subjects a transfer to the penalties of a Class B felony. House Bill 1589 would set the stage for putting the names of the New Hampshire gun owners into a national gun registry by requiring that virtually every gun transaction in New Hampshire, private or commercial, it will be subject to a Brady background check. Thus, if you live in Stark or Fitzwilliam and wanted to sell your gun to a lifelong next-door neighbor, you would have to take a day off and drive to a federal licensed firearm dealer. Once you got there, you might find out what frequent gun owners already know. The system is frequently down for long periods of time or delays, sometimes over even a weekend. And 80% of all breaking law inquiries result in false positives, which means you're taking another trip back to the dealer. But that's not all. Recently, the DATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, has gone into gun dealers in connection with its annual inspection and demanded to be allowed to copy all the information from the dealer's bound book, ATF 4473 firearm transaction records, thus compiling it back to the gun registry. I'm going to take a break for a minute from this. And if a dealer ever closes shop, those books go back to the FBI. I think people need to be aware that those books are in fact the record of every gun transaction and becomes the National Gun Registry, and it needs to stop. Sorry, that was my turn. So the drafters of House Bill 1589 claim that they prohibit a state or local firearms registry. Actually, the bill says the state shall not establish one. It doesn't say it prohibits one. Well, the BATF is not a state or local agency, it's a federal agency. And it doesn't consider a list of all the gun owners to be a registry, so you will be making New Hampshire residents part of this federal gun registry. I could go on, there's a lot more to this letter. I would ask you to read the letter fully. NHFC opposes this on all fronts, okay? Ask that you vote this bill inexpedient to legislate, okay? Because we don't need a New Hampshire gun registry.
Thank you for your testimony.
Lastly,
I'm sorry.
That's fine. I just want to note that I'm going to turn in petitions from a bunch of people that were out from the State House on Sunday afternoon complaining about the fact that this is going on and had to work today, and they couldn't be here to testify. So I've got a stack of petitions signed. In addition to all the people who signed in opposing this bill, they're opposed to this. We need to stop this in New Hampshire. Okay? This will not save the lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you take questions? Thank you. You say that friends who are hunting together or people who are on the shooting range together will not be legally allowed to transfer their weapon to be used at that time. But the way I read the bill says that it would allow such transfers to occur.
As I read the bill, they can't loan that rifle to go with somebody else on a hunting trip, okay? That's a transfer.
They can't loan, I'm sorry.
They can't loan their rifle to a friend for their friend to use on a hunting trip. If there's a transfer in quotes as the language is written, okay, both parties need to be at the range that day. Okay, I can't lend a firearm for someone to try so they can go consider buying it and then let them go to the range and try it. That's now a transfer. That's now subject to a $35 fee. I won't even go into the fact, and part of my notes here, when Colorado tried to create a whole bunch of arcane laws, okay, they drove companies out of the state. Same thing with Massachusetts and Connecticut. We have a strong firearms tradition. We have a lot of manufacturers here. In fact, 6 Hour in Exeter is a big company. Ruger, another big company. These employ thousands of people. The National Shooting Sporting Foundation believes that there's 5,000 jobs in the state of New Hampshire, and we're willing to risk that over this. This is a bad idea. It's a bad idea on multiple fronts. It's a bad idea because it's a gun registry and sets in place for that to happen. It's a bad idea because it starts to take away the jobs from the people who actually work in the state.
Your response clarified my question. Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Thank you for